In this exercise, we're going to finish the to-do list by adding a remove item choice to our menu and then write the code to actually remove an item from the list. This is a problem with text files because you can't go directly to an item in a text file. You have to work your way from the top of the list to the item wherever it is in the middle of the list. So if the item you want to remove is at the first of the list, that's not too hard. But if it's in the middle, you have to perform some tricks to make that work. So I'm going to show you at least one version of a trick right now. Let me show you what I've done already. I added a remove item function call to our switch statement. So we added a third choice and I created a call to remove item. That's the function I'm going to create here in just a moment. Also, back up at the beginning of the program, I added a #include statement for vector because we're going to use a vector in removing an item from the list. You'll see why in just a moment. So now let's scroll down to the first available place to write the remove item function, and let's begin writing it. The function is called remove item. It's a void function. We're going to ask the user to select an item to remove, so we need a variable to store that selection. Then we want to display the list of items so that the user can decide which item in the list to get rid of. So we call the showList function. Then, just to be on the safe side, let's clear and sync up our CN so that we don't have any problems with input. Then let's prompt the user, which item do you want to remove? Get their choice. Let me scroll in a little bit so we have some room so you can see better. Let me scroll a little bit more right there. That's good. Now we need a vector. Let me explain what we're going to do in this function. We're going to get a vector and store the items except for the one that's selected into that vector. So we're going to loop through the list and then store each item in the vector except the item that corresponds to the one the user wants to remove. We'll skip that one. Then when we've stored all the items in the vector other than the one that needs to be removed, then we'll write it back out to the file. So we need a vector, first of all. Now we need a number to keep track of which item in the list we're at. Then we need to create an input file. So we'll do that. Then we need to check to make sure that it exists, so we'll write that code real fast. This would be a good section of code to strip into its own function or refactor into a function call. We call it in just about every function in the program, so it probably deserves to be its own function. Then we create a string variable for an item. We get the first item from the file, store it in item using getLine. Then we loop through the file while we're not at the end of the file, as we've done before. Let's get rid of that space. We'll leave the space there. It doesn't really matter. Then, here's where we decide. If number not equal to choice, put that item into the vector. Increment number by 1. Let me scroll a little bit more here. And then get another item from the file. Close the input file. So now we have the new list stored in the vector minus the item we want to remove. So now we'll create an output file. iOS out. We want this to be out mode and not append mode because we want to create the file all over again, and that's what will happen when you create a file that already exists in out mode. It deletes it and then recreates it. Test the file to make sure it's there. We're going to copy this code. See what I mean about this being a function. We'll change this to out file. It would save us 4 or 5 lines. Well, it'd save us 4 lines in this function for sure, 3 or 4 times, so maybe 12, 15 lines. Then we're going to write a loop and loop through the vector and write each individual item from the vector to the file. And that's all we have to do, and then close the file. And we are complete. Besides these file checks being functions, this whole function is probably longer than a good function should be. We could have broken it up into this section through here, and then the rest of the program. But even just getting the file checks into its own function would help make the program a bit more readable. Okay, I think we're ready to test and run the program, so let's do that. I'll bring this over a little bit so you can see. Let's add an item to the list. Rake leaves. Let's add another item to the list. Wash clothes. Let's add another item to the list. Oh, do homework. Let's look at the list. Notice I've added a little heading for each one of these. So the list, to-do list, and there's our 3 items, and I have a little heading for the main menu. Now let's remove an item. So we select 3. It lists for us the 3 items. 1, rake leaves. 2, wash clothes. 3, do homework. Let's get rid of number 2. Now let's display the list again. And so you see that now wash clothes has been removed from the list, and we have rake leaves and do homework. Let's add an item. Let's say cook dinner. Let's display the list. Let's get rid of number 1. Remove an item from the list. 1. Let's display the list again. And we have do homework and cook dinner. And we can stop the program. So again, to look at this function real quick. Besides this setup, the first thing we do is we display the list. Then we ask the user which item they want to remove. We loop through the file. And if the number of the item in the file matches the choice of the user, then we don't put it in the vector. If it doesn't match, in other words, if it's not the choice the user made to delete, then we do add that item into the vector. And we do that till we're through the input file. Then the last piece of that is just rebuilding the file. And all we do for that is we simply loop through the vector, and for every item in the vector, we add it to the file. So that concludes this chapter on text processing, and I hope you've learned a little bit about how to work with text files. It's fun to work with text files in programs, and you'll find this information useful and practical.